Hello. If you're gonna wonder if I'm smoking in this video, I promise I'm not. It's just some incense. And that candle is not gonna burn my walls. It's at a decent distance, but in perspective, it looks like it's touching the wall. So, I had a couple of ideas for what I would like to do for the next few videos. But I tried to think what would be the most useful one to do before anyone else, obviously. And anyone. Anyways. And since most of the other ideas are along the lines of some book recommendations or review, or actually I have one where I'm thinking of doing some kind of comparison commentary on two books, what would be the best thing for me to do? The best thing for me to do would be to introduce the perspective from which I come from as a person that basically blabbers to you on the internet for a good couple of minutes. I think it only makes sense to me that I actually give you a bit of insight into what I like, what I don't like, my preferences when it comes to reading, some biases that I probably have, how things started for me and how we got to the taste that I have nowadays, some maybe hot takes. I don't know if I have any. I think we'll discover throughout this video because I'm letting myself be spontaneous with it. And yeah, all of that jazz. And just letting you know, basically, having some insight into my inner reader world so that you get the rest of it and you can always refer to this video and see where I'm coming from and if you align with this kind of stuff or not. If you dig, you dig. If you don't, you don't. And that's perfectly fine. Anyways, let me get into it. Let me start you up with probably the most basic thing I could talk about, and that is what genres of books do I generally gravitate towards, and which ones do I usually struggle with? Or maybe topics, not necessarily genres in general. We're gonna touch, kind of slightly randomly and chaotically as I do. Okay, when it comes to the ones that I notice I have a propensity and a certain comfort zone into, yes, I do usually read classics, and I end up in that area a lot. So preferably older, not necessarily modern, or at least you can tell that in my collection. But it doesn't have to be. I also just really like any kind of psychological novel. It doesn't matter if it's fantasy or non-fantasy. I just like existentialism. I like talking about life and philosophizing without getting too wordy and fancy with it, because yes, I understand that certain concepts are better explained with big words, and I am by no means encouraging anti-intellectualism, but I think that there's times where I would like to understand and I don't, and maybe that is a me problem, but also at some points, I think we can all agree we've met at least one book in our lives where the author was basically trying to prove that his vocabulary dick is big, and you should acknowledge it. There was no other way for me to say it. I'm sorry. Or maybe there was, but I don't care. So, yeah. Other than that, I really like historical fiction. I find a comfort in it that is very... I don't know how to explain it. I don't know where it really comes from. But I think the more intimate and the more detailed it is, and the more sensorial it kind of goes, and the more I get of this projected past, the more I enjoy it. It really makes me feel like the author put in quite a bit of effort, and especially if the historical fiction / historical novel is well researched, or it actually has a very good theoretical backbone, it's such a huge book turn on. You have no idea. I do also just enjoy sort of social commentary. So wait, I should have it somewhere. I mentioned it in the other video. I promise I'll... Wait, I can't do this. This kind of book, where you basically have some kind of social commentary on phenomenons that are very much alive in areas like art, ethics, economics, politics, whatever. And also, I think that that's probably what attracts me so much to certain fiction works, like Dune. You can clearly tell that somehow the plot and everything about the world also tries to tie back into a very real discussion. I really like substance or fantasy that is rooted in something so very human that it's almost haunting, because it's such a valid discussion, like economics and politics and all of that stuff. You need to have that kind of backbone to it, and if I can sense it, if I can bite into that discussion, then that makes the book amazing. Onto the things that I struggle with liking, and on this one I'm going to keep it short because there's not much I can say. There's a lot of personal preference that comes into it. Romance for me can be really tough. Wuthering Heights, great. The Inseparables is not overtly romantic, but it came to mind. Carmilla. I'm thinking. Okay, I'm coming up with nothing. I haven't really scoured the newer romance novels because I get turned off and I cringe very easily, and that might just be a me problem. My cringe threshold is nothing. So, yeah, there's that disclaimer. I don't like super explicit sex scenes unless there's a very good reason to, which I find, for example, in books written by Sayaka Murata. I think Earthlings has this incestuous sex scene, but it makes sense in my head in the way that I see it, because it's not about the sex scene, it's about the desire of the character to get close to a human being, to have that experience, to love something so much, or to feel so intrigued by it, or whatever. So it made sense back then. Another thing that I struggle with, and I just don't have the interest, but maybe I should, seeing my mental health, is personal development. I just don't. And a lot of them are very... They give you the most obvious advice, and they pretend to be smart. Maybe I just read the wrong ones, and I'll totally acknowledge. On both ends of these two topics, I haven't really given chances much. I've been very prejudiced and judgmental, so... yeah. Now, when it comes to topics that I really enjoy, I do feel like I gravitate a lot towards alienation, melancholy, nostalgia, somehow intense passion, or just intensity in general. I do like really sensory heavy books, which is why I think, okay, I have two favorites: Perfume and Patrick Susskind, talked about it multiple times, and Frankenstein. Different, but makes sense if you look at the pairing in itself somehow. You know, it's a discussion of the monstrosity of a human being, or yeah, that's what it is. So themes like obsession, ethical questions, again, I've said that already, I'm a broken record. Desire that doesn't lead to happiness per se, like you see that in Wuthering Heights as well, another big one for me. See, okay, that's gonna come into a point later. I think way too fast. I don't necessarily like happy stories, I like real stories. I don't like fantasy that is unanchored. I like fantasy that breaks me a little bit, you know? Like life does. Another discussion that I would like to have is about when I start a book but I feel like I won't like it, I still finish it a lot of the times. There's very few moments in which I will start a book and I won't like it and I won't finish it. 90% of the time I have the curiosity to see where it goes, because I always try to find an explanation as to why something is put into a book. I want to trust the vision, even if I don't always get it. Does that mean that sometimes, because I don't like it, I avoid a book like there's no tomorrow? Absolutely. Does it make me read very little, besides my already fading attention span from the internet and social media? And probably some kind of phone addiction? To some degree, because we all have it? Yes. Is that good? No. Do I still sit with it? Yes. Do I also have a habit of reading 4 books at the same time, which does not work for me, mind you? Yeah. Do I want to break it? Yes. You didn't need that context, but I gave it. So then, what's something that immediately and maybe slightly superficially kind of sells me onto a book? I think there's the attention to detail, or really clever metaphors for sure do the trick for me at any point. I think any allegory gets the job done. Okay, that's an overstatement, not any. I think it needs to hit the balance of, it's not so abstract that nobody outside of the author will get it, which I'm guilty of doing in my own writing, I think, sometimes, actually. Anyways, not the point. It strikes the balance of making sense, but also being so out of the box. That's one thing. And another one, details. And I mean, I like to be nosy. I'm very nosy. And I like to see in a historical novel, or even in a high fantasy novel, habits, food. I'm big on food descriptions. I don't know why, but yeah. Small mentions, but I mean intentional small mentions about a certain species of something, or giving me a little taste of something technical or considered miscellaneous, but not going too much into it, because there can always be that. And somehow it really makes me feel like I've taken roots into that world, because the more I feel like I'm a spider in a room on the ceiling watching that, and I can fixate on a small detail, the better it is. Somehow, if that makes sense. I feel like I'm engaged with the world. It's not just the characters, it's not just the action. You trust me with being a spider on the ceiling of this book, in a way, as an author. And that's a skill, if you ask me. Now, I mentioned that I like intensity, but I also like the whimsy of the everyday life. And I also like something slightly memoir-like, something that gives me an insight. Again, I think this speaks to my nosy nature, but for example, Joan Didion, when she talks about small habits that she would have, when she describes events around her, when she describes, I don't know, whatever she's going through at the moment, when she explores her traumas, when she explores what happened in this particular time with this particular event, when she reports on a problem, whatever. I also appreciate that, but I think what I like is that she doesn't just stop at telling you this happened. It kind of makes you further question what is going on behind the scenes. I like something that gives me the space in a slightly restrained way to think about the implications of what I'm being presented, rather than being completely handed an explanation. Again, I'm guilty of doing that in my writing, I would say, where I go way too much into one direction, not the band. So I make sure you understand exactly what I'm trying to get at. Not a pleasurable experience for me as a reader, so it shouldn't be something that I do as a writer, because I should hold myself up to my own standards. But yes. Another thing, I would like to find a balance in books between intellectualism and reachability. Proximity to understanding. Does that make any sense? I hope so. Yes, I think we suffer from quite a bit of anti-intellectualism at this point in time. But at the same time, I wouldn't want to go to the other pole of the question and go for something that is so tremendously wordy and conceptual and hard to grasp that I don't get it. Again, that can be a discussion about 10,000 things if I really look at it, but I think a balance should be struck a lot of the times when it comes to creating meaning with words. Try to always find a middle ground so as many people as possible can understand. It's easy for people who are here to go here, and easier for people who are here to go here. And there's no shame in being anywhere, because everybody has a reading journey and a journey of understanding different concepts that is completely different and unique, but we all start from somewhere. So hitting here is usually optimal if you ask me. That is such a weird visual. I don't like smartasses, I don't like close-mindedness, I don't like superficial plots, and I don't like things that lack depth. I probably wouldn't like to just read a romance for the sake of romance. I want romance with havoc behind it and life behind it. I want books that feel alive. I don't want them to be a mirror of a concept. I want them to feel like the author isn't just writing for himself, they're also letting you touch the paper in a way with your own imagination and mind and your own interpretation and ideas. And there's authors that, to me, do not do that in the way that I read it. And I probably usually state it out loud when I feel like that's a thing. And obviously I have a whole bunch of ethical things where, yeah, sure, I do prefer a feminist narrative, but in comes some personal biases, besides others, like not being racist, like, you know, a whole bunch of things. But that's kind of the gist of my tastes, I would say, and usually what I comment on. Notice how I don't go into any tremendous specifics, because I don't necessarily have a set matrix, and I don't think anybody should. I think we should retain some kind of open-mindedness, but yeah, that's the gist of it. I hope this gives you some kind of insight. I don't know if this is the most useful video to anybody, but if you're running across my channel and you see some recommendations, I would rather you have this video to refer to, or 5 seconds. Let's face it, I talk a lot more than 5 seconds. And you get where I'm coming from and see how you feel about it. Anyways, kisses. I didn't burn the wall. Hope you're having a good time. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt myself. Yeah. Have a good time, kids, and take care of yourselves. And see you with some proper talk. Proper biased subjective talk.